It was supposed to be the most triumphant evening of my entire existence. I had just earned my master's in business administration. There I was, seated at the head of a long, polished table at the Vesper Club, surrounded by my closest friends, respected colleagues, and my parents. The lighting was low and intimate. The wine was a vintage I couldn't have afforded a year ago. I felt, for the very first time, like I had finally, truly arrived. Then my mother, Helen, tapped her water glass with a spoon. A hush fell over the room. My mentor, Daniel, gave me a warm, knowing smile, clearly anticipating a proud maternal toast. I was anticipating a toast too. I thought, this is it. Finally, she truly sees me. She stared directly into my soul. Her words weren't slurred from the wine. She didn't bother to whisper. She spoke with a chilling clarity, loud enough for the adjacent table to stop their own conversation and listen. I wish you had never been born. It felt as though the soft jazz music playing in the background had been violently unplugged. The gentle hum of laughter evaporated instantly. Someone dropped a fork, and the sound of it clattering against a ceramic plate was like a gunshot in the sudden, suffocating silence. Everyone was frozen, their eyes flicking back and forth between my mother's ice-cold expression and my own, which I'm sure was a mask of pure shock. They were all waiting for me to shatter. They were waiting for the tears, for me to break down. But I didn't break. Instead, a bizarre and frigid sense of peace washed over me. That single sentence didn't destroy my life. It merely obliterated my relationship with them. It was the exact moment their power over me finally, blessedly, died. Before we get into the rest of the story, please take a second to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from in the world. I grew up in a big colonial house on Maplewood Lane in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. If you were to drive past our home, you'd assume we were the picture-perfect American family. The grass was always a vibrant, impossibly green carpet. The hedges were trimmed into perfectly straight geometric lines. In the driveway, you'd always find two meticulously clean sedans. Every Sunday we would emerge from the front door, dressed in our finest attire, and head to church. My father, Robert, would be in a suit and tie. My mother, Helen, would wear her pearls. We looked like a photograph torn from a lifestyle magazine. But photographs are silent. Photographs don't show you the reality that unfolds once the front door clicks shut. Inside that house, there was a very particular order, an unspoken system. It was like a miniature solar system. My parents were the gravitational force that held it all together. But the sun, the blazing, brilliant star at the absolute center of their universe, was my younger sister, Olivia. I was just a distant, forgotten planet, spinning alone out in the cold, black expanse, careful not to disturb anything or anyone. Olivia was 4 years younger than me. From the instant she was born, she was their miracle. She had a cascade of blonde ringlets and enormous blue eyes, and she cried with an impressive lung capacity. The moment she would let out a wail, the entire house would grind to a halt. My mother would sprint to her side. My father would let his newspaper drop to the floor. They'd coo and whisper to her, holding her as if she were made of delicate glass. I have this vivid memory of standing in the doorway of her nursery when I was about 5. I just watched them. I waited for one of them to glance over, to acknowledge me, but their gaze never wavered from her. They were utterly captivated. That fundamental dynamic never shifted. As we grew up, it only intensified. Olivia was loud, she was chaotic, she was entitled. If she coveted a toy, she would scream until it was hers. If she refused to eat her dinner, my mother would patiently cook her an entirely separate custom meal. My parents would laugh and call her spirited. They'd beam with pride when she took crayons to the living room walls, proclaiming, "Oh, look at her creativity." I was the opposite. I was quiet. I was meticulous. I understood from a very early age that no one was about to prepare a special meal for me. I knew that if I drew on the walls, I wouldn't be praised for my artistic flair. I would be grounded for a month. And so, I became the good one. I had this naive belief that if I was absolutely perfect, they would have no choice but to love me as much as they loved her. I kept my bedroom immaculate. I folded my laundry into neat squares. I set the table for dinner every night without ever being asked. I earned straight A's in every subject. I'd bring home report cards covered in perfect marks, thinking that this, surely, would be the key to unlocking their affection. I remember one Tuesday afternoon with perfect clarity. I was 13. I had just won first place at the state science fair. It was a huge deal. I'd spent months on my project, building a miniature volcano that actually simulated different types of eruptions. I came through the front door clutching the large blue first place ribbon. To me, it felt more valuable than gold. I walked into the kitchen, my heart thumping with anticipation. I just wanted to see my dad's face light up with pride. I wanted my mom to wrap me in a hug. "Mom? Dad?" I called out. They were both there. My mother was tenderly applying a bag of frozen peas to Olivia's elbow. Olivia was crying, but they were dramatic, theatrical tears streaming down her cheeks. She had tripped over her own feet while chasing a butterfly in the backyard. It was a tiny scrape, barely a scratch. There wasn't even any blood. "Mom," I said again, stepping closer and holding up the ribbon. "I won. I won the science fair." My mother didn't even turn her head. Her entire focus was on Olivia's elbow, her face a mask of intense concern. "Not now, Chloe. Can't you see your sister is hurt? Go find the Neosporin, quickly." I stood there for a moment, the blue ribbon feeling suddenly flimsy in my hand. "Robert, look at this swelling," my mother said to my father. My father leaned in, his expression grave. "Poor little thing," he said, stroking Olivia's hair. "We'll get you some ice cream after this." I placed the ribbon on the kitchen counter. It made a soft, rustling sound that they didn't notice. I went to the bathroom, retrieved the first aid kit, and brought it back to my mother. She took it from me without a word of thanks, without even a glance in my direction. She just tore open a cartoon-themed Band-Aid and placed it with surgical gentleness on Olivia's elbow. "There," she said, kissing Olivia's forehead. "You're so brave, my sweet girl." I walked back to the counter, picked up my ribbon, and went to my room. I pinned it to my corkboard. I sat on my bed and waited. I waited for them to come in and say, "We're so sorry, Chloe. We were just worried. Congratulations. We are so incredibly proud of you." I waited for 2 hours. They never came. Later that evening at dinner, Olivia got 2 giant scoops of chocolate fudge brownie because she had been so brave. The science fair was never mentioned. I ate my food in silence, a heavy lump forming in my throat that I couldn't swallow. That was the essence of my childhood. I was the background static. I was the one who cleaned up the messes Olivia made. When Olivia shattered a crystal vase playing catch in the house, she'd cry, and my mother would soothe her, saying, "It was just an accident." But when I forgot to take out the recycling one time, my father delivered a 20-minute lecture on responsibility and laziness. They had 2 entirely different sets of rules. One for Olivia: "Do whatever you want, you are perfect, and we love you." And one for me: "Be perfect, be silent, be useful." I began to believe that love was purely transactional. I thought I had to earn my very presence in that house. I started doing their laundry. I started mowing the lawn so my dad wouldn't have to. I cooked dinner every Friday night. I became a ghost in my own home, learning to walk so softly that the floorboards wouldn't creak. I learned to instantly read the mood of a room. If my mother was sighing, I knew I needed to go clean the kitchen. If my father was scowling at the TV, I knew I needed to vanish into my room. I was profoundly, achingly lonely. Olivia didn't make things any better. She was fully aware of her status as the favorite, and she wielded it like a weapon. If we had an argument, she would flash a wicked little grin and say, "I'm going to tell Mom you pushed me." "I didn't push you," I would protest. "Doesn't matter," she'd whisper back. "They'll believe me." And she was always right. They always did. By the time I turned 17, I came to a realization that fractured my heart. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a high-performing employee. I was their live-in help. I was an investment that was expected to yield dividends of good grades and zero trouble. Olivia was their child. Olivia was the one they loved unconditionally, simply for existing. I remember looking at myself in the mirror one morning before school. I studied my own face, my brown eyes, my straight brown hair, the determined set of my jaw. I looked so much like my father. But when he looked at me, his eyes were always vacant. Why? I asked my reflection. What is so wrong with me? I didn't have an answer. I just thought that maybe if I worked even harder, things would finally change. I thought that if I achieved something monumental, something they absolutely could not ignore, they would finally look at me the way they looked at her. I was wrong, of course, but I didn't know that yet. So I just kept working, kept achieving, and kept waiting for a love that was never going to arrive. I stopped trying to win their approval with small victories. I decided I needed something enormous, something undeniable. I had convinced myself their love was conditional, and I just hadn't met the conditions yet. I made a new set of rules for myself. If I get into an Ivy League school, they will love me. If I land a high-paying job, they will love me. If I become a massive success, they will finally have to be proud. So I transformed myself into an achievement machine. Throughout high school, while Olivia was at parties and dating the captain of the football team, I was in the library. I enrolled in every AP course the school offered. I joined the mock trial team, not because I enjoyed public speaking, but because I knew it looked good on a college application. I volunteered at a local food bank every Saturday morning at the crack of dawn. I ran on fumes, fueled by black coffee and the sheer will to succeed. I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't have a social life. I had a 5-year plan. When I was 18, the acceptance letters began to arrive, first from the state schools, then from larger universities. My parents would offer a cursory nod when I showed them. "That's good, Chloe," my father would say, his eyes still glued to the sports channel. "Just be sure to look at the tuition." Then, the large, embossed envelope arrived. Duke University. I remember holding it in my hands at the end of the driveway, the afternoon sun glinting off the official seal. My hands were trembling. This was it. This was one of the top universities in the country. This was my golden ticket. I sprinted into the house. "Mom! Dad!" They were in the living room. Olivia was sprawled on the couch, scrolling idly through her phone. She was a junior in high school at the time, pulling C's and D's and being praised for trying her best during such a stressful time. "I got in," I gasped, holding up the letter. "I got into Duke." My mother took the letter and put on her reading glasses. She read it over slowly. I held my breath, my mind racing with visions of her finally hugging me, of my dad patting me on the back. "Duke," my mother said, lowering the letter. "That's in North Carolina, Chloe. That's very far away." "It's one of the best schools in the country, Mom," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of excitement and desperation. "It's expensive," my father grumbled. "We have to think about Olivia's college fund, too. She's planning on going to pre-med. Medical school isn't cheap." I felt the air get sucked out of my lungs. I got a partial scholarship," I stammered. "And I'll get a job. I'll take out loans. You won't have to pay for all of it." "Well, that's good," my mother said, handing the letter back to me as if it were a utility bill, "because we really need to focus our resources on Olivia. She has a true calling, you know. She wants to be a doctor." Olivia blew a bubble with her gum, and it popped loudly. "Yeah, I'm gonna save people's lives." "See?" My mother beamed at her. "Saving lives. That's so noble." I just stared at them. I had just been accepted to Duke, and they were already talking about Olivia, who was currently on the verge of failing biology. "I'm going to study business," I said quietly. "I'm going to get my MBA after." "Business?" My father scoffed, pushing papers around, chasing money. "It's not exactly serving humanity, is it?" I went to Duke. I took out a mountain of student loans. I worked 3 jobs. I was a barista at a campus coffee shop, starting my shift at 5 a.m. I was a tutor for undergrads in the evenings. I was a research assistant for a professor during the summers. I hardly ever saw the Carolina sunshine because I was perpetually indoors, either working or studying. I sent them regular updates. I made the dean's list. I secured a coveted internship at a top consulting firm. I was elected president of the Women in Business Club. Their replies were always brief, impersonal texts. "Nice. Did you hear Olivia got into Ohio State? She's doing pre-med." Olivia did go to college. My parents paid for absolutely everything. Her tuition, her dorm, her car, her designer clothes, her spring break trips to Cancun. They eventually took out a second mortgage on the house to fund her medical school application process. Meanwhile, I was surviving on instant ramen and counting every penny to make my rent. But I kept pushing. I graduated at the top of my class. I worked for several years, aggressively saving every dollar, and then I went back for my MBA. I wanted to reach the absolute pinnacle. I wanted to be so successful that they couldn't deny me. By the time I was 27, I was perpetually exhausted, but I was also successful. I had a management position lined up at a prestigious firm in Chicago. I was going to be making a 6-figure salary. I went home for Christmas that year. The house on Maplewood Lane looked exactly the same, but inside, the shrine dedicated to Olivia had expanded. There were now framed photos of Olivia in her white coat everywhere. Olivia holding a stethoscope. Olivia posing in front of the university hospital. "Where are my graduation photos?" I asked my mother, gesturing to the crowded mantelpiece. "Oh," she said, waving her hand vaguely, "we have them in an album somewhere. But look at this new one of Olivia. Doesn't she look so professional? A doctor. Can you believe it? A doctor in the family." "She's a resident, Mom," I said. "She's still in training." "She saves lives, Chloe," my father cut in sharply. "What do? You help corporations make more profit. It's not the same." It always came back to that. The doctor card. It was their ultimate trump card. Because Olivia was pursuing medicine, everything she did was sanctified. Because I was in business, everything I did was inherently selfish. They conveniently ignored the fact that I had sent them money when their furnace broke last winter. They ignored the fact that I had bought them a new 60-inch television for their anniversary. They cashed the checks. They watched the TV. But they had no respect for the person who provided them. I met Daniel Carter around that time. He was a director at my firm, and he quickly became my mentor and my closest friend. He was the first person who ever truly saw me for me. One afternoon, I was crying in the break room after a particularly brutal phone call with my mother. She had called to ask for money for Olivia's car repairs because Olivia was so stressed at the hospital. She can't be expected to deal with bills right now. Daniel walked in. He silently handed me a tissue. "Family?" he asked gently. "Yeah," I wiped my eyes. "They make me feel like I'm completely worthless. No matter what I accomplish, it's never enough." Daniel sat down across from me. "Chloe, look at you. You are the sharpest person on this entire floor. You're kind, you're resilient, you're strong. If they can't see that, it's because they're blind. Don't you dare let their blindness define your own worth." I clung to those words. I tried to make myself believe them. But that little girl inside of me, the one who just wanted her parents' approval, was still desperate. I thought, maybe the MBA graduation will be the thing. It's the highest degree you can get in business. When they see me in that cap and gown, when they see the extravagant dinner I'm paying for, they will have to be proud. I planned the entire dinner at the Vesper Club. It was the most exclusive restaurant in the city. I invited my colleagues so my parents could hear other people sing my praises. I wanted to orchestrate the perfect evening. I wanted to force them into acknowledging me as a success. I bought a new dress. I had my hair professionally styled. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and told myself, tonight is the night. Tonight, you stop being the invisible daughter. I drove to the restaurant with a fragile, dangerous sense of hope blooming in my chest. I didn't know it at the time, but I was walking straight into an ambush. I was meticulously setting the stage for my own public execution. I thought I was still fighting for their love, but in reality, I was fighting a war that had been lost 2 decades ago. I just didn't realize it yet. I parked my car, took a deep, steadying breath, and walked into the Vesper Club, ready for my moment of triumph. I had no idea I was walking toward a cliff. I chose the Vesper Club for a very specific reason. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was a declaration. It was the kind of establishment where the waiters wore white gloves and the menus for guests discreetly omitted the prices. I wanted to show my parents, in no uncertain terms, that I had made it. I wanted them to see that their other daughter, the one who wasn't a doctor, the one who wasn't a miracle, had worth. I had reserved the private room in the back, a space with dark mahogany walls and a long, imposing table draped in heavy gold linen. I pre-selected the finest wine. I had a lavish floral arrangement placed as the centerpiece. I paid for the entire evening in advance. I didn't want my father making a single complaint about the cost. I needed the night to be flawless. My guests arrived first. There was Daniel, my mentor, looking dapper in a charcoal suit. There was Sarah, a colleague who had spent countless late nights studying with me. There was Dr. Evans, one of my favorite professors from the MBA program. They all greeted me with warm smiles and enthusiastic hugs. "Chloe, this is incredible," Sarah said, her eyes wide as she took in the room. "You really went all out. You deserve it," Daniel said, giving my shoulder a firm squeeze. "Top of the class. It's a monumental achievement." I smiled, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a genuine sense of happiness. I felt seen. These people respected me. They understood the work I had put in. Then the door creaked open, and the entire atmosphere of the room shifted. My parents walked in. My father, Robert, was in a suit that looked a little worn. My mother, Helen, wore a floral dress she reserved for distant relatives' weddings. They didn't smile. Their gazes swept across the room with a critical air, as if they were inspecting a hotel room for dust. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad," I said, walking toward them. I leaned in to hug my mother, but she turned her head, offering me a cold, rigid cheek. "This place is very dim," she said, pulling away, "and it took us an eternity to find parking." The valet was completely useless. "I'm sorry about that," I said. "But I'm so glad you're here. Where's Olivia?" Dr. Evans asked politely, knowing about my sister from our conversations. "She's working," my mother announced immediately, her voice suddenly animated. She picked up an extra shift in the emergency room. She's just so dedicated. She barely has time to sleep, let alone dine at fancy restaurants. The way she said fancy restaurants made it sound like a moral failing. It made my entire celebration feel frivolous and selfish. We all took our seats. The waiters began pouring wine. My colleagues, bless them, tried to make conversation. "So, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes," Daniel said, turning on the charm, "you must be bursting with pride for Chloe. We were just discussing her final thesis. It's set to be published in a major business journal." My father took a long sip of his wine and frowned. "Business journals," he muttered. "Do people actually read those?" Daniel's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Well, yes. In our field, it's quite a prestigious honor." "That's nice," my mother said, meticulously buttering a bread roll. "But you know, real pride comes from making a real impact." Olivia called me this morning. She saved a man who was having a massive heart attack. Literally brought him back from the brink of death. Now that's something worth writing about. An awkward silence descended upon the table. "Of course," Dr. Evans said gently, trying to smooth things over. "Medicine is a wonderful profession, but Chloe's work in strategic economics helps companies stay afloat. It saves people's jobs. That has its own importance." My mother let out a small, condescending chuckle. "Jobs. Money. It's all just pushing paper around, isn't it? It's not flesh and blood. It's not saving a life." I sat there, gripping the linen napkin in my lap so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Please," I begged silently. "Just for one night. Just let me have this one thing." "Mom," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, "can we please focus on tonight? This is my graduation dinner." She looked at me with wide, feigned innocence. "I am focusing, Chloe. I'm just saying we need to keep things in perspective. You earned a nice degree. That's lovely, but let's not pretend it's on the same level as what your sister does." The appetizers arrived, but my appetite had completely vanished. I stared at the beautifully plated scallops on my dish and felt a wave of nausea. My friends were visibly uncomfortable. They soon gave up trying to engage my parents and started talking amongst themselves in hushed tones. I could feel their pity radiating towards me. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. They saw it all. They saw the dynamic I had spent my entire life trying to hide or explain away. They saw that my parents simply did not like me. I tried to salvage the evening. I asked my father about his golf game. I asked my mother about her garden club. They gave me terse one-word replies. They kept checking their watches. "I hope this doesn't run too late," my father announced loudly. "We have a long drive back, and I want to be up early in case Olivia calls." "Olivia's not going to call at 6 a.m., Dad," I said, exasperated. "You don't know that," my mother snapped. "She might need us. She relies on us, unlike you. She needs our support, unlike me. Because I was strong, because I paid my own bills, because I didn't call them crying for attention. My independence was a crime. They punished me for it." The dinner dragged on. The main courses were served. The wine flowed. The tension in the room grew thicker until it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I glanced at my mother across the table. She was looking down at her phone, hidden under the tablecloth. She was texting Olivia. At my graduation dinner, she was texting my sister. It was then that I realized I could win a Nobel Prize, and she would still be checking her phone for a message from her favorite daughter. The waiters cleared our plates. It was time for the toast, the part of the evening I had been both dreading and hoping for. Daniel stood up, tapping his glass with a fork. The room fell silent. "I'd like to say a few words," Daniel began. He looked at me with such genuine warmth that I felt my eyes begin to well up. "I've managed a lot of talented people in my career, but I have never met anyone with Chloe's tenacity and vision. She's the first one in the office and the last one to leave. She handles immense pressure with incredible grace. She is brilliant, compassionate, and absolutely unstoppable." "To Chloe!" my colleagues chorused, raising their glasses high. I looked at my parents. They were holding their wine glasses, but they didn't raise them. They didn't drink. "That was a nice speech," my father said, remaining seated. He swirled the wine in his glass, looking utterly bored. "Very enthusiastic." "It was the truth," Daniel said, his voice a little sharper now. He was getting angry on my behalf. "Your daughter is remarkable." My father scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "Remarkable? Look, she's a hard worker, we know that. She's always been efficient. But let's not get carried away. She's not saving the world here. She's helping some corporation squeeze out an extra 2% profit." "Dad," I said, my voice trembling, "please." "What?" he challenged me. "Am I wrong, compared to being a doctor? Compared to the life and death situations Olivia faces every single day? This," he gestured around the opulent room, "this is just vanity. This is just you showing off." I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. I worked for 4 years for this degree. I worked 3 jobs to pay for it. I am proud of it. Why can't you just be happy for me? "Because you demand so much attention," my mother suddenly exclaimed, slamming her hand flat on the table. The silverware rattled and everyone jumped. "Helen," my father said, but he made no move to stop her. My mother turned her fury on me. Her face was blotchy and red. Her eyes were hard as stones. "You always have to turn everything into a production, Chloe. Look at my grades, look at my promotion, come to this ridiculously expensive dinner. Do you have any idea how tired we are? We are worried sick about Olivia. She is doing real important work. And you drag us all the way to Chicago to worship at the altar of you." "I didn't ask you to worship me," I said, standing up. My legs were shaking beneath the table. "I just asked you to show up. I just wanted to have one nice dinner with my parents." "You are so selfish," my mother hissed. "You have always been selfish, cold and calculating. You think your money can buy you love. You think this fancy food makes you better than us." "I never said that," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Tears were stinging my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I just wanted you to love me." "Love you?" My mother laughed. It was a cruel, hollow sound filled with disbelief. "We fed you, we clothed you, we housed you, but you were just so difficult to love." The room was dead silent. My friends looked on in frozen horror. The waiters in the corner had stopped moving. My mother took a deep, steadying breath. She looked me right in the eye. She wanted to wound me. She wanted to win. "Honestly, Chloe," she said, her voice now perfectly clear and steady, Sometimes I wish you had never been born. It would have been so much simpler for us." The words just hung there in the silent, heavy air. "I wish you were never born." I felt like I had been punched in the solar plexus. All the air left my body. I looked at my father, waiting for him to object, to say, "Helen, that's too far." But he didn't. He just stared down at the tablecloth, tracing a pattern with his finger. He didn't deny it, and that was the answer. That was the raw, ugly truth I'd been running from my entire life. They didn't just prefer Olivia. They actively regretted my existence. I was a mistake they had been tolerating for 27 years. The silence stretched on. It felt like an eternity. I looked at Daniel. He looked absolutely furious, ready to leap across the table. But I wasn't furious anymore. I was just done. Something inside me snapped. It was the sound of a thick, rusty chain finally breaking, the desperate need for their approval, the hope that they might one day change. It all just evaporated. It was gone. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a drink. I simply picked up my purse. I smoothed down the front of my new dress. I looked at my mother, whose face was still contorted with rage. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was eerily calm, the voice of a stranger. I turned and walked toward the door. "Chloe," Daniel called out. "Wait! Where do you think you're going?" my father barked. "We're not finished here." I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked out of the private room through the main dining area. The rhythmic click, click, click of my heels on the polished hardwood floor was the only sound I heard. It sounded like a clock counting down my old life. Or maybe it was counting up my new one. I pushed open the heavy front doors of the restaurant and stepped out into the cool Chicago night. I left them there with their expensive wine and the untouched dessert course. I left them there with the bill I had already paid. I left them with their perfect daughter who wasn't even there. And for the first time in my life, I walked away without ever once looking back to see if they would follow. I walked out of the Vesper Club, and the heavy glass and iron door swung shut behind me. When it closed, it muffled the sounds of the restaurant completely. The clinking of glasses, the soft jazz, the chatter, it all vanished. Outside, Chicago was doing its thing. A steady, cold drizzle was falling, coating everything in a slick, gray sheen. The streetlights bled across the wet pavement in streaks of gold and red. I didn't hail a cab. I didn't open my phone. I just started walking. My apartment was nearly 3 miles away. I was wearing 4-inch heels and a silk dress that was quickly becoming ruined. I didn't care. I needed to feel something real. I needed the cold rain on my skin to prove I was still awake, that I hadn't just hallucinated the nightmare at that dinner table. "I wish you were never born." The words echoed in my head, a relentless loop. I walked past tourists huddled under umbrellas. I walked past a bus shelter where people stood shivering. They stared at me, a woman in a cocktail dress, walking alone in the rain, my hair plastered to my face. They probably thought I was drunk or having a breakdown. I wasn't having a breakdown, I was having a breakthrough. I was seeing with perfect, painful clarity for the first time in 27 years. My feet began to blister. The damp cold seeped into my bones. But I kept walking. With every step, I replayed my life. I thought about the first place science fair ribbon. I thought about all the Christmases I spent cleaning up wrapping paper while Olivia played with her mountain of gifts. I thought about the student loan bills I paid myself. I thought about the time my car broke down and my dad told me to figure it out, just an hour before he drove Olivia to the mall. I had spent my entire existence trying to fill a bucket that had a gaping hole in the bottom. No matter how much love, effort, or success I poured into it, it was designed to remain empty. They were incapable of loving me. And tonight, my mother had finally told me why. I wasn't their daughter. I was their obligation. I finally reached my apartment building. The doorman, Henry, looked at me with alarm. "Miss Hayes, are you all right?" "You're soaked to the bone," he exclaimed, rushing to hold the door for me. "I'm fine, Henry," I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. "Just went for a long walk. In this weather?" "It's cleansing," I said, a strange thought to have. I rode the elevator up, listening to the quiet hum of the machinery. I unlocked my door and stepped into my sanctuary. It was quiet. It was clean. I had picked out this furniture. I paid this rent. This space belonged to me and me alone. I kicked off my ruined heels, and walked into the kitchen without turning on the lights. I poured myself a tall glass of water. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from pure adrenaline. I looked at my laptop sitting on the kitchen island. I had a choice. I could crawl into bed, cry myself to sleep, and wake up tomorrow hoping for an apology that would never come. I could call them, begging for forgiveness for walking out. That's what the old Chloe would have done. But the old Chloe had died at that table. I opened the laptop. The screen cast a cool blue glow in the dark room. I logged into my online banking portal. I navigated to the Scheduled Transfers tab. It was a long list. I had automated everything to make it easier to not have to think about the fact that I was funding two separate households, mine and theirs. I scrolled down the list. Transfer to Robert and Helen Hayes, $1,500. Memo, mortgage assistance. They had told me 2 years ago they were struggling to keep the house on Maplewood. I had stepped in without a second thought. Transfer to Olivia Hayes, $1,000. Memo, rent support. Mom had said Olivia couldn't possibly focus on her medical studies if she had to worry about a part-time job, so I paid for her apartment. Transfer to Progressive Insurance, $185. Memo, Olivia Car Insurance. I was paying for the car she used to go to parties. Transfer to ATT Wireless, $250. Memo, family plan. I paid the phone bill for all four of us. I stared at the figures on the screen. It totaled over $2,900 a month. That was money I could have been putting towards a down payment on my own home. Money I could have been investing. Money I could have used to see the world. Instead, I was using it to rent a seat at a table where I wasn't even wanted. I hovered my cursor over the first item on the list, the mortgage payment. My finger trembled over the trackpad. A voice in my head, my mother's voice, screamed, "You can't do that. We're family. You owe us." "I don't owe you my life," I whispered to the empty apartment. "I don't owe you for the privilege of being born." I clicked cancel. A pop-up box appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment?" I clicked yes, one down. I moved to Olivia's rent. Click, cancel, confirm. Olivia's car insurance. Click, cancel, confirm. The family phone plan. Click, cancel, confirm. I went down the list with cold, surgical precision. I canceled the Netflix account they used. I canceled the Amazon Prime membership they shared. I removed my credit card information from their DoorDash account. It took less than 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, I systematically dismantled the entire financial scaffolding I had built to support them for the last 5 years. When the screen finally displayed no scheduled transfers, I leaned back in my chair. I waited to feel a pang of guilt. I waited for the panic to set in. It never came. Instead, I felt lighter. I felt as if I had just shrugged off a 50-pound backpack full of rocks that I'd been carrying since I was a child. My chest expanded. I took a deep, shuddering breath, and the air actually felt sweet. I closed the laptop. Then I picked up my phone. I had 17 missed calls, 8 from my mom, 5 from my dad, 4 from Olivia. I didn't listen to a single voicemail. I didn't read a single text. I went to my contacts. I selected Mom. I scrolled to the bottom of the screen. Block caller. I selected Dad. Block caller. I selected Olivia. Block caller. I put the phone down on the counter. It was done. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower, as hot as I could stand it. I peeled off the cold, damp dress and stepped under the steaming water. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, washing away the rain, the restaurant, and the rejection. I cried then. But they weren't tears of weakness or sadness. They were tears of grief. I was mourning the death of the family I had always wanted, letting go of the phantom limb of hope that they would ever change. I stepped out of the shower, put on a pair of warm, soft pajamas, and crawled into bed. The sheets were cool and crisp. The apartment was completely silent. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for a phone call. I wasn't worrying if I had done enough to please them. I was just me, alone, yes, but free. And I slept more deeply than I had in years. The next morning, I was startled awake by the sound of my buzzer. I glanced at the clock. It was 9:30 a.m. on a Saturday. I walked to the intercom on the wall. "Who is it?" "It's Daniel," the voice crackled through the speaker. "I come bearing bagels and coffee. Do not send me away." I buzzed him in. A minute later, Daniel Carter was at my door, holding a large paper bag from a local deli and 2 steaming coffees. He looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept well either. "I was worried," he said simply as he walked past me into the kitchen. "You walked out of there like a phantom. I thought you might have, driven into Lake Michigan." "I did something drastic," I said, taking one of the coffees from him. "I cut them off completely." Daniel froze, a bagel halfway out of the bag. He stared at me, his eyes wide. "You mean, I stopped all the money? I blocked all their numbers? It's over, Daniel." He let out a long, slow breath and sank onto my sofa. "Thank God," he said. "I have wanted to tell you to do that for years, but I knew you had to get there on your own. They told me they wished I wasn't born," I said, sitting across from him. Saying the words out loud in the bright morning light made them sound even more monstrous. My own mother. "She's a narcissist, Chloe." "They're a toxic system," Daniel said firmly. "You were the only healthy organ in a diseased body, and they were killing you." We ate our breakfast in a comfortable quiet. Daniel didn't pressure me to talk. He just sat there, being a friend, being the family that I chose. "So what now?" he asked eventually. "Now," I said, looking out my window at the Chicago skyline, "I work. I crush this project. I become the person I was always meant to be before I got so damn distracted trying to win an unwinnable game." The next few weeks were strange. I started calling it the Great Silence. Every day, I half expected the police to show up for a wellness check. I expected a guilt-ridden letter in the mail. I expected my father to be waiting for me in the lobby of my office building. But there was nothing. The silence from their end was deafening, but it was also profoundly revealing. It proved that without my money, without my constant effort, there was no relationship. I had been single-handedly holding up a bridge, and the moment I let go, it collapsed into the river. It hurt, of course. There were nights I'd stare at my phone, my thumb hovering over the unblock button, just to see if they'd tried to reach out. But I never did it. I channeled all of that anxious energy into my work. I was leading a major project on supply chain logistics for a huge tech client. Before, I would have second-guessed every decision. I would have worried about being too assertive, about seeming too ambitious. I would have heard my father's voice in my head warning me not to show off. But with that voice gone, I became fearless. I completely restructured the proposed model. I presented bold, aggressive strategies. I argued my points in the boardroom with a newfound confidence that surprised even myself. "Chloe is on fire lately." I overheard a vice president remark one day as I passed his office. I stayed late, not because I was avoiding my empty apartment, but because I genuinely loved the work. I was building something real. One evening, I decided to write an article. It wasn't for a client. It was just for me. I wanted to write about the intersection of emotional resilience and corporate strategy. I wanted to write about how emotional intelligence is often more valuable than raw data. I wrote about the sunk cost fallacy, The idea that you shouldn't keep pouring resources into a failing project just because you've already invested in it. You have to know when to cut your losses and walk away. I realized I was writing about my family. I typed for 3 nights straight, pouring my heart out onto the page but masking it in the language of business theory. I titled it, The Architecture of Abandonment, Knowing When to Divest. I sent it to the Chicago Business Quarterly on a whim. I didn't expect to hear back. 2 days later, the editor-in-chief called me herself. "Ms. Hayes," she said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "This piece is extraordinary. It's raw, it's honest, and it's exactly what our readers need to hear right now. We want to run it as our next cover story." "The cover?" I stammered. "Yes. And we'd like to do a full profile on you, the rising star of Chicago finance." I hung up the phone and just sat in my office chair, spinning slowly to look at the incredible view. The Willis Tower pierced the clouds. I had done it. I had achieved this huge public recognition, and the very first thought that popped into my head was not, "I have to tell my mom." The thought was, I did this. I went out that weekend and bought myself a new coat. It was a classic camel-colored trench coat, expensive and perfectly tailored. I looked at myself in the department store mirror. The woman looking back at me didn't look like a background character anymore. She looked like the protagonist of her own story. I started sleeping through the night. The perpetual knot of anxiety in my stomach finally uncoiled. My skin cleared up. I made new friends. I went to art galleries with Sarah. I started going on hikes on the weekends instead of sitting by my phone. I was healing. I was building scar tissue over the wound. I thought I was safe. I thought they had given up. I thought they had accepted the new reality, but I had forgotten one fundamental thing about my family. They didn't care about me, but they absolutely cared about what I provided. And when the money runs out, desperate people do desperate things. It had been nearly 6 weeks since the dinner. I was at home on a Tuesday night cooking dinner for myself, chopping vegetables and listening to a podcast. I was peaceful. Then there was a knock at the door. Not a buzz from the lobby, but a sharp, insistent knock directly on my apartment door. I froze. Henry, the doorman, always buzzed guests up. No one could get to my floor without a key fob or being let in. I put the knife down. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway light was dim, but I recognized the silhouette immediately, the posture, the coat. It was my mother, and standing behind her, looking impatient and angry, was my father. My heart started hammering against my ribs. They had found me. They must have tailgated someone into the building, bypassing security. They were here. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. This was the real test. The silence had been easy. The distance had been easy. But facing them again? Facing the people who broke me? I took a deep breath. I pictured that cancel button in my mind. I unlocked the deadbolt. Click. I wasn't the girl who sat crying at the dinner table anymore. I was the woman who walked away in the rain. I opened the door. But I didn't move aside. I stood firmly in the doorway, blocking the entrance to my apartment. My mother, Helen, looked me up and down. She didn't look happy or relieved to see me. She looked irritated, like I was an underling who was late for a meeting. My father, Robert, stood behind her, his face flushed and puffy. "Well," my mother said sharply, "are you going to let us in? It's cold out here." "Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad," I said. My voice was eerily calm. It surprised even me. My heart was pounding, but my voice was a flat line. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk, Chloe," my father grumbled. "Now." "You blocked our numbers," my mother accused, her voice dripping with indignation. Do you have any idea how childish that is? We've been trying to reach you for weeks." "I know," I said. "I saw the missed calls." "Then why didn't you answer?" she demanded. She tried to step past me, assuming I would instinctively move out of her way. That's how it had always worked. She pushed, and I yielded. But I didn't move. I planted my feet. I didn't answer because I had nothing to say to you. She stopped, shocked. She glanced back at my father. "Robert, are you hearing this?" "Chloe, move," my father snapped. "We're not having this conversation in the hallway. We're not having it inside either," I said. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it right here." My mother let out a sharp, exasperated sigh and clutched her handbag. "Fine. If you want to air our dirty laundry in front of your neighbors, that's your decision. We came because there is a crisis, a financial crisis." I almost laughed. Of course. It wasn't, "We miss you." It wasn't, "We're sorry." It was money. It was always, always about money. "What crisis?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Olivia's tuition payment is overdue," my mother said, her voice rising with panic, and the mortgage payment bounced. "The bank sent us a formal letter, Chloe, a foreclosure notice. They said we are 30 days delinquent." "And?" I asked. My father stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "And you're the one who handles that. You set up those payments. You canceled them without a word to us. You've put this family in jeopardy." "I didn't put you in jeopardy," I corrected him calmly. "I just stopped rescuing you." "Olivia is a wreck," my mother cried out. She called me sobbing. "She can't register for her next clinical rotation until the balance is paid. She could get kicked out of the program, Chloe. Her entire dream is at risk. How could you be so cruel?" And there it was, the classic twist. I was the cruel one. They had told me to my face that they wished I didn't exist, but I was the villain for turning off the money tap. "You want money?" I stated flatly. It wasn't a question. "We want you to do your part," my mother said. "We are a family. Families are supposed to help each other." I looked at them. I really looked at them, stripped of the fear and obligation that had always clouded my vision. They looked smaller, more pathetic, just two selfish people who had groomed one daughter to be a show pony and the other to be a workhorse. "I remember the last time we were all together," I said softly. "I remember it very clearly. We were at dinner, a dinner I paid for, and you said something to me." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, stop it. You're going to hold a grudge over one little sentence?" "We were stressed. You were being overly dramatic. You said, 'I wish you were never born,'" I repeated, the words like stones in my mouth. My father groaned. "We were angry, Chloe. You know how your mother gets. You provoked her, showing off with that fancy dinner, having your boss give those speeches. You made us feel small." "I made you feel small?" I asked, incredulous. "By getting my master's degree?" "Yes," he shouted. "By acting like you're better than us. By acting like you're better than Olivia." "I never thought I was better," I said. "I just wanted to be equal." "Well, you're not being equal right now," my mother snapped. "Right now, you are being a petty, vindictive child. Olivia needs $7,000 for her tuition by Friday. We need $3,000 for the mortgage. Write us a check, Chloe. Fix this mess you made, and we can all go back to normal." Normal. Normal was me being their invisible janitor and their personal ATM. Normal was me buying their affection and receiving only their contempt in return. I looked at my mother's expectant face. She genuinely thought this would work. She thought she could show up, insult me, demand money, and I would crumble, desperate for a scrap of her approval. But that desperate part of me was dead and buried. "No," I said. The word hung in the air of the hallway. Simple, Clean. Final. What did you just say? My mother whispered, her eyes widening. I said no. My mother's face cycled from pale to a deep, blotchy red. You can't say no to us. We are your parents. I am aware of that, I said, and it's the only reason I haven't called security. You owe us, my father bellowed, his voice echoing down the hall. A neighbor's door cracked open, then quickly shut. We raised you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. You did what the law required, I said, my voice steely. You fed me because you had to. You housed me because you had to. That is not love, Dad. That is basic maintenance. And I have paid you back for that maintenance 10 times over. I paid off your credit card debt. I paid for the new roof. I paid for Olivia's car. That's just money, my mother spat. That doesn't compare to the love and support we gave you. What love? I asked, my voice quiet but cutting. The love where you ignored my biggest achievement to put a Band-Aid on Olivia's elbow. The love where you told me my entire career was meaningless. The love where you told a room full of my peers that you regretted my birth. You are twisting everything, my mother shrieked, her body trembling with rage. You are a horribly ungrateful child. You are going to ruin your sister's life just to spite us. She saves lives, Chloe. She matters. I matter too, I said. It felt powerful to say it. I matter, my feelings matter, my work matters, and my money matters, and I am done spending any of it on people who despise me. My mother's eyes narrowed into slits. She stepped forward right to the threshold of my apartment. If you don't help us, she hissed, you are no daughter of mine. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a sad, weary, final smile. Mom, I said, you made that perfectly clear a long time ago. I'm just finally agreeing with you. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. You will regret this, she threatened. When you're old and alone, you will wish you still had a family. You'll come crawling back. I don't think I will, I said. Olivia will be a famous surgeon, my father yelled. And you will be a nobody. We'll write you out of the will. We'll never speak to you again. Is that a promise? I asked. They stared at me, their faces masks of pure hatred. It was a look I used to have nightmares about. Now, it just looked pathetic. I'm going to close the door now, I said. Don't you dare, my mother began. I am, I said. I looked at them one last time, memorizing their angry, desperate faces. Not because I wanted to remember them, but because I wanted to remember this moment of my own liberation. If you had come here to apologize, I said, I would have listened. I would have made coffee. We could have talked. But you didn't come for me. You came for my wallet. You came to take. Chloe, my father started. Goodbye, Robert. Goodbye, Helen, I said. I didn't call them Mom and Dad. They had forfeited those titles. I stepped back and took hold of the door. You selfish bitch, my mother screamed. I slammed the door shut. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I slid the chain lock into place. Slide. I stood there in the sudden quiet of my apartment. I could hear them on the other side. My father was pounding on the wood with his fist. My mother was shouting a stream of vile insults, things designed to gut me. You're ugly inside. No one will ever truly love you. You were a mistake. I leaned my back against the solid wood of the door. I could feel the vibrations from his fist, but they couldn't get in. I was safe. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor, wrapping my arms around my knees. I listened to the pounding until it finally stopped. I heard their angry footsteps retreating down the hall. I heard the elevator ding, then silence. I sat there for a long time. I waited for the guilt to come. I searched my heart for it, but it wasn't there. Instead, there was a strange, warm feeling spreading through my chest. It was pride. I had protected myself. I had finally stood up for the little girl who used to pin her awards to a corkboard in an empty room. I had stood up for the woman I had worked so hard to become. I wasn't a victim anymore, I was free. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The first few weeks were eerily quiet. I kept their numbers blocked. I informed Henry at the front desk that if my parents ever returned, he was authorized to call the police. They never came back. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Olivia had to take a semester off from medical school to work 2 jobs and save money. I heard my parents had to sell the house on Maplewood Lane and downsize to a small condo because they couldn't afford the mortgage without my help. When I heard this news, I didn't feel joy. I wasn't vindictive, but I didn't feel sad either. I felt nothing. It was just a fact. Actions have consequences. For years, I had been their human umbrella, shielding them from the storms of their own making. Now, they were standing in the rain, and I was no longer there to keep them dry. My life, on the other hand, began to flourish. The article I wrote for the Chicago Business Quarterly went viral. It was shared tens of thousands of times online. I received emails from strangers all over the country. One email, in particular, stood out. It was from a young man in Texas. "Dear Chloe," he wrote, "I read your article about divestment. I know you were writing about business, but it felt like you were writing about my life. I haven't spoken to my abusive father in 3 years, and I feel guilty about it every single day. But reading your words made me realize that I'm not a bad son for leaving. I'm a survivor. Thank you for giving me permission to choose myself." I printed that email and pinned it to the wall above my desk. I got a major promotion at work. Daniel took me out for celebratory drinks. To the new director of strategy, he toasted, his eyes beaming. "To freedom," I replied, clinking my glass against his. I started dating again. I met a man named Ethan. He was a kind, funny graphic designer. On our 3rd date, I told him about my family. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't feel ashamed. "I don't speak to them anymore," I said simply. They were toxic, so I walked away. Ethan reached across the table and took my hand. "That must have been one of the hardest things you've ever had to do," he said. "I have so much respect for that strength." He didn't judge me. He didn't ask, "But they're your parents, aren't they?" He just saw my resilience. One evening in late autumn, I was standing on the balcony of my apartment. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of the lake. The lights of the city twinkled below me like a carpet of fallen stars. The ferries moved like slow, glittering jewels across the dark water. I had a glass of red wine in my hand and was wrapped in a thick, comfortable sweater. My phone was inside, silent. I thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who polished a cheap science fair ribbon, hoping it would be enough. The girl who ate her dinner in silence, trying to become invisible. The girl who wrote check after check, trying to buy an affection that was never for sale. She felt like a different person now, someone I knew a long, long time ago. I missed having a family sometimes, or rather I missed the idea of a family. I missed the Hollywood version where everyone gathers for Thanksgiving and laughs and feels loved. But I realized I had built my own family. I had Daniel, I had Sarah, I had Ethan. I had the readers who saw themselves in my words. And most importantly, I finally had myself. I took a sip of wine and looked up at the sliver of a moon. "I wish you had never been born," my mother had said. I smiled at the memory. The words had lost their power. They no longer had any sting. They were just noise. "I'm glad I was born," I whispered to the night sky. I was glad I was born because I got to experience this quiet peace. I got to experience the feeling of the wind on my face, the deep satisfaction of work I was proud of. I got to experience the joy of waking up in a home where no one screamed, where no one demanded, where no one ever made me feel small. I had walked through fire and come out the other side. I wasn't ash. I was forged steel. Maybe I was never the daughter they wanted. They wanted a servant. They wanted a mirror to reflect their own choices back at them in a flattering light. They wanted a bank. I was none of those things. Maybe I wasn't the daughter they wanted, I said aloud, my voice strong and clear in the quiet night. But I became the woman I needed, and that was more than enough.